Hello and most welcome to Heidegger 1642 of the series. We will today approach a completely new author, HANS-JOSEF KLAUCK, an article named "Do They Never Come Back?" Nero, Redivivus, and the Apocalypse of John. It was first published in the Catholic Biblical Quarterly. And it's better to have the text in 175%. Make it easier for the viewers to see. Yes, much better. I think this text maybe can try to give it a 200, see what happens. It's a bit smaller, this text. Well, I see works. 200 would be perfect for the Nero Redivivus text. The birth of a legend. A neglected testimony. Dio Chrysostom, Oration 21. Dio Chrysostom, the famous orator in the 1st century of the Common Era, deals rather extensively with Nero and his love affairs in one of his speeches, which is entitled On Beauty, and really is more a dialogue than an oration. One passage especially is often quoted, but rarely analyzed. At the end of paragraph 9, Dio alludes to Nero's death and adds that we still do not know for certain what really happened. Then he continues, for so far as the rest of his subjects were concerned, there was nothing to prevent his continuing to be emperor for all time. Seeing that even now everybody wishes he were still alive, and the great majority do believe that he is. Although in a certain sense he has died not once, but often along with those who had been firmly convinced that he was still alive. The speech is dated by Jones to 88 AD or later. Keeping this probable date in mind, there are at least 5 pieces of information that to be drawn from this passage and its framing. The first item is: there were uncertainties about Nero's death. He died in January 68 at the age of 31. Presumably by suicide with the help of his private secretary, but without many further witnesses. Secondly, Nero's downfall obviously came as a surprise to many, not least to himself. His reign seemed well-founded and stable. He was still a young and rather healthy man. Dio indicates this by telling us with obvious exaggeration that Nero could have continued to be emperor for all time. In the third place, we have to ask why, as Dio relates, does everybody wish Nero were still alive? to put it more precisely, why does Dio at least seem to wish it? This is easily explained if the dating of the dialogue on beauty to 88 or a few years later holds true. Dio compares Nero favorably with Domitian, who had exiled him from Rome and whom he utterly dislikes. Then we hear, fourthly, that many people do believe that Nero is still alive, which does not seem impossible if we consider his age. He would have been in his early 50s when Dio produced his speech. We can expand on this a bit with the help of the Roman historians. If we follow Suetonius, astrologers had predicated to Nero his downfall, but they had also promised him the rule of the East. When he was cast off, a few expressly naming the sovereignty of Jerusalem. And after his death, there were those too who for a long time behaved as he were still alive and would shortly return and deal destruction to his enemies. Tacitus writes in his histories, the reports with regard to Nero's death had been varied, and therefore many people imagined and believed that he was alive. there still remains as our fifth and last item Dio's final remark, which looks enigmatic. In a certain sense, Nero has died not once, but often, along with those who had been firmly convinced that he was still alive. This is often understood as a reference to the false Neros we know from other sources. Tacitus and Cassius Dio locate the first false Nero in 69 in the Common Era. Little more than a year after Nero's death. Suetonius recalls another pretender who was in high favor with the Parthians 20 years later. With some additional knowledge and a bit of rhetorical exaggeration, Dio Chrysostom could have said that false Neros have died not once, but often. And that their followers are dead now, too. But I'm not quite sure if that is the correct reading of the passage. Another possibility would be Dio wanted to say that the expectation of Nero's return got frustrated all too often. And each time some hope among the people died away. Nevertheless, the phenomenon of the false Neros did exist. It is strangely similar to the false Christs and false prophets in Mark 13:21 to 22, who say, "Look, here's Christ." Look, he is there. And it is not unknown in modern days either. As David Orne, in his thorough new commentary on Revelation, aptly remarks, even in the late 20th century America, Elvis Presley has been cited by hundreds of people. To sum up, Theo is very valuable. Since independent, witness for the origin and early development of the Nero legend. The basic pattern is already here. Though we can identify the single traits only if we have already an idea of the whole picture. Additional details. Some details, nevertheless, are still missing, and we will supply them mainly from historians. We may wonder, why should anybody miss Nero at all and bother about his comeback? Partial answers are to be found. in Suetonius, who on the one hand refers to public rejoicing and the putting on of liberty caps at Nero's death. But on the other hand, also mentions those who for a long time decorated Nero's tomb with flowers and clad his statues with the toga praetexta. Tacitus still knows about mixed reactions, especially the lowest classes, he says, addicted to the circus and theater, two forms of diversion that Nero's name stood for, were cast down and grasped every rumor. Later, Otto tries to win over the Roman people by celebrating Nero's memory. People and soldiers for some days addressed him accordingly as Nero Otho. The last point is important since it wins new significance with another disputed emperor, Domitian. Juvenal, in his fourth satire, which ends with the murder of Domitian, refers to him as Nero. Rome was enslaved to a bald-headed Nero. Nero was not bald-headed, but Domitian was. And he seems to have been, very touchy about it. Maybe Marshall too uses Nero as an epithet for Domitian. Nero has become not an individual pseudonym, but a topical name suitable for any tyrant. The most prominent features of the Nero legend so far are Nero is still alive. Nero will return from the east with troops. There are impostors who pretend to be Nero, and Nero's name can be given to other persons too. This is not yet the evolved myth we mean when speaking of Nero Redivivus. We see some mythical colors already here and there, but nowhere does Nero return from the dead or from the underworld. Yet it is exactly the transformation of the legend we need if we are to apply the Nero tradition to revelation. Is the missing link to be found somewhere? The missing link, the Sibylline oracles. One answer is that we have to look to the Sibylline oracles for this link. The earliest strata of the extant collection of Sibylline oracles are products of Hellenistic Judaism, adapting a well-known form of pagan prophecy for its own needs. They can be dated to the 300 years between 150 before Common Era and 150 in the Common Era. The oldest material is found in Book 3, where Rome is incidentally called many-headed. But we always have to reckon with the possibility of interpolated passages. Books 3 and 4. Especially interesting for us is Book 4 from the late 1st century Common Era, where the Nero legend is clearly present in 119 to 24. Then a great king will flee from Italy like a runaway slave, unseen and unheard, over the channel of the Euphrates. When he dares to incur a maternal curse for a repulsive murder. When he runs away beyond the Parthian land, many will bloody the ground for the throne of Rome. In 4137 to 39, his comeback is announced, and the fugitive of Rome will also come, brandishing a great spear. Nero's attack on Rome and the empires is envisaged by the Jewish tradition as a punitive action against Vespasian and Titus, who have destroyed Jerusalem and the temple. I go to look for some outtakes of the text I just read. Page 685. Nevertheless, the phenomenon of, that's the second paragraph, 685. The phenomenon of false Neros did exist. Look, and further down you see a reference to Mark. Look, here is Christ, or look, he is there. There have been in the Bible a mentioning of so-called false Christs, not to be confused with the original. And the example of the true Elvis Presley further down in comparison to the made-up Elvis Presleys. I have myself experienced being in Las Vegas many years ago, and the singer was Elvis Presley, but he was an uncanny copy of him, not the true original, but a copy. And at the very end here, I think it's a good conclusion. To sum up, Dio, at the end of the same second paragraph, Dio is a very valuable since independent witness for the origin and early development of the Nero legend. The basic pattern is already there, though we can identify the single traits only if we have already an idea of the whole picture. And at the end of what we read, no, 686. At the end of the third paragraph, some small paragraphs there. Yet, the very end, it is exactly that transformation of the legend we need if we are to apply the Nero tradition to Revelation. So the true Nero in comparisons to the copied ones, the translated ones, do play a role here. There is an interesting homonym here too, at least in writing. It's Nero or Nero in English, and water in Greek, which was the language at least, half of the Roman Empire, which means water. One could see the homonym Nero as a copy of Nero. And to mind here comes false as water to mean a copy. Nero is here the copy of the original Nero. And there is a classical case of iteration when Nero is becoming an extra name. Bald-headed Nero, Domitian. And then even used for others later on. Otho. Nero, Otho. So there is sort of iterative thing going on here. It's the transformation, it's the copying, it's the DNA that goes from one place to another, establishing a whole series of Neros. Very interesting. Myth Nero Redivus. Was a bit meager with comments here. Maybe you found something else, Kalle. You're more than welcome to comment.
We can always think about the legends about Hitler, who, like Nero, was popular. And there were legends that he would return one day. That he was living in Argentina or somewhere else.
Ah, yeah.
Instead of him committing suicide. And here you had this, the real historical Nero had only one witness, his servant. So they were not really private secretary. So who knows if Hitler was sleeping and somebody would return. So parallels between Nero and Hitler, but
You disappeared a bit. Try to speak directly into the microphone.
yes. Yes, so I think there are good parallels between Nero and Hitler. Let's say this is let's go to the Jewish point of view. Here we had Jerusalem in this, let me see, the Sibylline oracles. They are products of Hellenistic Judaism. So he liked Nero. And Jews didn't like, of course, Titus and Vespasianus, who destroyed Jerusalem. Of course, we cannot compare Nero with Hitler. We can only make a comparison to a certain degree, but not here. Here is the stops the comparison. Of course, the Jews would not wish that Hitler would return. But these Jews of the first century, they hoped that Nero would return, perhaps to give back Jerusalem to them.
Ah, yes, of course, yeah.
So, okay, we have still but okay, the Jews are not completely positive to Nero because they mention his murder of his mother. these Jews, they had an ambivalent view of Nero, I would say.
That is in itself interesting. Do you have any double names of Nero? I think that is also a question.
I don't know, actually. No, I don't know. Okay, so they think that Nero is a hero to a certain degree, but they also see that he killed his own mother. So I don't know. So it's these ambivalent traits. Okay, I think we can. That's what I wanted to say.
Yes, it was rather skinny, the text. But maybe, hopefully, when it develops, we can get some more material. But I do like those double takes. They should be present in any text to make it more thoroughly when it's played on two sides or three and more. As we learn in the series, that gives volume to the text, it gives it strength. But I think maybe we should end there, see what happens next. I will stop the recording. Thank you very much for listening, for your patience.